Hi scholars, it's Dr. Kennedy. I'm going to review Module 6 out of Critical Thinking about Social Problems. And Module 6 looks at physical, mental, and social wellness. This is really the health module in the textbook. And we start out by talking about the disparities that you will see as far as health and healthcare. So we look at the different economic issues, whether you're rich or poor, the access you have to healthcare, maybe even some of the factors you'll face because of your income, things you're exposed to, your nutrition based on income. Also some social factors as well as environmental, so you can think about geographically. One of the examples I like to consider is places like the Central Valley. So in the valley, the way that the valley floor is shaped, it's very much like a bowl. And so what happens is because we're central in the state and the weather patterns, that a lot of the air pollution gets blown into the valley. And so one of the major health ailments that we have here is asthma or lung-related illnesses, and it's because of the air pollution. Even recently, we've had a lot of forest fires. The smoke getting trapped on the valley floor causes different issues that you might find somewhere else, either in the United States or across the globe, depending on where you live. There's different exposures that you'll have environmentally. So that's a good one there. As well as demographic disparities, the difference between children, adults, older adults, and what illnesses they face. But also when you're looking at gender, difference between men and women, some of the ailments, and then some of the treatments, why more money is spent on men's care rather than women's. And then also looking at the differences in racial background, ethnic background. You'll see that there's certain patterns. Some groups have higher incidences of one illness over another. And then that all affects like the quality of healthcare. So we kind of talk about those different components and how they'll affect your access to care and quality of care and what you're exposed to. There's three major terms that we talk about when we look at health status. One is morbidity. And a way I like to remember, because morbidity and mortality are two of the indicators that we look at, and sometimes students have a hard time remembering them. So I have this little thing, a little visual image in my mind that I always put to help me remember the difference and sum up the differences between the two terms. So morbidity, because this is health related, I always think of zombies, because I'm thinking about, the incidents, like how many people are impacted by the illness. Well, that's like zombies, the zombie apocalypse, how many people get impacted, what's the prevalence of that, how many more people are becoming zombies, and then their symptoms, that's really what morbidity looks at. So it helps me remember that just visually in my mind of what the term encompasses. And then mortality, I always like to think about vampires because the whole idea is that they can live forever. Well, we don't. So mortality always helps me think about that. What are the death rates and what influences death rates? So those are two of the things that we look at when we're considering health status, as well as life expectancy, how long people live. And we'll also break those down based on demographics and what things influence how people live. So you'll find that a lot at the beginning of Module 6. And then on page 112, we actually get into the social issues. And in this module, we pick some social issues that have been current in the public eye and the social mind, things that people are considering. So obesity, we have a lot of discussion about obesity, as well as tobacco. And now we're kind of switching from cigarette smoking to vaping. So there's been some trend changes that have affected that social issue. And then we also cover big pharma, so talking about prescription drugs. And then there's a great application. It's on page 115. It's Sociological Application 6.1. And it actually looks at, are pharmaceutical drugs safe? So it talks about that and makes you consider some of the illicit drugs. Because honestly, what happens is if you look at some of the illicit drugs, some of the compounds and ingredients within them are being reproduced and put into pharmaceutical drugs. It's just a legal way of trying to manage the ingestion or inhalation of it, depending on what it's used for. So it is regulated, but there is some controversy because some of the pharmaceutical drugs have the same elements that you will find in some of the illicit drugs. So there's that application really looks at that, what is safe. Is a natural drug safer than a synthetic one that's created in a lab that really does have the same chemical response and things like that. So that's a great application. And then we go into mental illness, a lot of data on that. That's one of my areas, so you're going to find a lot of information about mental illness. It's one area that I've studied and worked in a lot. Also cover it a lot when I discuss deviance and violence and things like that. Then we go to end of life issues. This is it's harder for students to think about and talk about because, we are talking about a death and a right to choose assisted suicide. But we do have some tables in here and some information related to that as well. And then there's an application 6.2, which is a media and the mentally ill. This is a good one to look at how the media influences our stereotypes, labeling, and stigma of the mentally ill. Also how they lack exposure about putting social pressure on making sure the mentally ill get the treatment and support that they need. So that's a great application. And then we end the module, we get into evaluating critical thinking. And we really ask you to look at some of the issues that presented. And we go back to the characteristics of critical thinking, looking at the emotionality behind health and the influence, not just if you're sick, but the influence of knowing people that are sick, how that affects us, psychologically and our emotional impact. So it asks you to evaluate that, as well as the responsibility of providing care towards each other. So there's ask you to kind of reflect and discuss some of those issues, and then explain what justifies a need for a healthy society. Why is it important that we have a healthy society? So those are great little questions to think about and evaluate and analyze to help improve your critical thinking specifically on this topic. And then we have the theoretical analysis, which asks you to look at one of the social issues presented and then analyze it using the 6 paradigms as well as the 2 perspectives, macro and micro. The social policy section asks you to consider recent laws that have changed regarding our health. So these are things that could be related to the end of life issues. Different states now are adopting that practice. So considering not just that, but also the legalization of marijuana. This is really the area where you would examine those things. And then we end with the social movements and reform, which looks at 3 current social movements working to improve health. The Shape Up America, really about addressing obesity. Death with Dignity, which is addressing the end of life issues. And then Physicians for a National Health Program. So there's some great organizations. You can do some research to learn about what social change is. People are working towards social change regarding health and wellness. So that concludes Module 6. Again, if you have any questions, please send me an email or contact me so we can schedule some time to talk and I can help you through the material. Ta-ta for now.